In a world where God is dying, four heathens come to deliver the final nails in the coffin. From the depths of hell, Satan sends four puppets of the imperialist West and the Zionist Jews against God, Islam, and tiny kittens to bring you their propaganda and conspire for a new world order. This is Secular Jihadists from the Middle East.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Secular Jihadists from the Middle East. My name is Ali Rizvi, and with me we have Armin Navabi, who's the founder of Atheist Republic. We have Yasmin. She's the author of Confessions of an Ex-Muslim, but I don't know which last name I'm supposed to use.
Muhammad.
Oh, okay, there you go, Muhammad. Oh, how did I forget? Muhammad. It's a unique
the name. Of your
unique
previous
name.
messenger.
Unique name. Yeah. And then we have, I guess he's spiritually present right now, is Faisal Saeed Al-Mutar. He's, I think he's having a shawarma at this point. He hadn't eaten, so he will show up very shortly. Inshallah, or we say inshallah, Darwin. That's what we do. Darwin willing. That's how we roll here. And today we actually have a very special guest. So the background of this is that in the Maldives, recently, a secular activist and blogger named Yamin Rashid was brutally murdered. He was hacked to death in his own home. And this story made headlines, and this is obviously very close to all of us because he was basically murdered, killed for doing what all of us do here freely every day. So this is whenever something like this happens, as has happened with Bangladeshi bloggers, as has happened even with the jailing of people like Raif Badawi in Saudi Arabia, this is something that really hits very close to us. It's a very personal thing for atheists from Muslim backgrounds.
Ali, I think I'm going to have to take over the introductions because your voice keeps on cutting.
Okay, please go ahead.
I'm gonna take the baton from you.
I've been hijacked.
So, just to recap, in case you missed anything that Ali was saying, today our guest is Muju Naeem, who is a blogger from the Maldives, and we've invited him to speak with us today because the Maldives is going through the same kind of conservative upsurge as the rest of the world. And just like Ali was saying, in Saudi Arabia and in Bangladesh and in Pakistan and in the Maldives as well, activists are being killed or disappearing for just speaking up for liberal secular values. So Muju, I'm going to pass it on to you, and you can give us a little bit of background about the Maldives and where you fit into this whole mess that's happening right now.
Hi guys, good to be here on the Secular Jihadists. Just to start with a little background on the Maldives, the political environment. The Maldives has been up until 2008 run by a 30-year-old dictatorship, which was pretty much in the form of sort of Egyptian style or some of the other, Middle Eastern style dictatorships. And it was mostly inspired by the Mubarak regime. And that was run by Gayoom, which was later. And then the democracy movement started around 2003 when a convict was murdered in the prison. And which sort of set the catalyst for a series of events that would lead to the establishment of the Maldivian Democratic Party and the constitutional reform that would follow, which would go on to have the first democratically elected president in 2008, Mr. Nasheed. 3 years into his presidency, there was a coup where the the democratic government was toppled by the same forces that was holding on during the dictatorship. And the toppling of that government happened under the pretext of protecting Islam. And once the democratic government was toppled, the initial democratic reforms that was achieved was sort of slowly repealed. And this was being done constitutionally. So it was now it was becoming different than the previous one. Previous one was a blatant dictatorship, but then later on, now it's a constitutionally mandated, legally legitimate dictatorship that was being formed. So whatever that's happening in the country is actually legal as far as the law is concerned, and most of the things. And they were just simply manipulating the constitution to do whatever they want. And this is the brother of the previous dictator who was doing it. Now, I don't think this guy is actually an Islamist per se, because his past history and his behavior and everything around him doesn't fit the bill, but he's happy to use the Islamist narrative just the same. But in that process, what's happened is legitimate, really threatening Islamists have climbed through the ladder into the government and in different aspects of the framework of government, you know. And these guys are serious threats to freedoms and democracy. And the same has been happening in the Maldives National Defense Force, and the same has been happening in the Maldives Police Force as well. So this is going to a place where it's going to be really hard to reverse. But at the same time, the rhetoric of development, you know, aspirations, the government aspires us to be a mini Singapore, as they like to keep repeating over and over again. So those things, those aspirations are in conflict with what's actually happening on the ground in terms of the hardline religious narratives that's being enforced. So in that environment, initially I was involved in mainstream politics up until 2010, from 2004 onwards. But then I shifted my attention and focus into, you know, minority rights and secular values and other related areas. And then I moved out of mainstream politics to focus on the activism for secularism, because the word secular itself is considered taboo in our country. Yeah, and this isn't, I don't believe this is just in our country, but it's the Islamic spinning of the word that it's somehow atheistic in itself, secularism as well.
So in the Maldives is almost 100% Sunni Muslim, is that correct?
Yeah, so the constitution says you cannot be a Maldivian unless you are Sunni Muslim at the moment. So
do you have any minority demographics? Or can you guys hear me okay now? Or?
Yeah,
yes.
I can.
Okay, I switched my connection from 5G to regular, so hopefully this works out. But yeah, do you have, what are the sort of minority demographics there, if any?
Well, there's no recognized minority demographic per se that's on any indicator or any documented level. But the people that I hang out with, the circles that I move about with, they aren't necessarily, Muslims. They don't identify themselves as Muslims. I've met, Christians. I've actually met Buddhists in the Maldives, and I've met, second generation atheists, even third generation atheists, and the LGBT community is quite small, but it's there, and they are forced into silence and into hiding as well. And there's a lot of hypocrisy around everything in terms of, how the LGBT community is even viewed. For example, during Ramadan or not Ramadan, during the circumcision season is actually what it is during the holidays, school holidays.
The circumcision season?
Yes, there is a season for it.
This is new to me. I have not heard of this.
So, yeah, you go ahead. Can you explain that?
Yeah. So during the school holidays, when, it falls into December, January, and kids around, 7, 8-year-olds.
Are you talking about boys or girls or both?
Yeah, we're talking about boys here.
Okay.
So during the circumcision season, as we call it, there'd be like hallways and communal circumcision events where,
So these aren't babies then? These aren't newborns?
No, these are newborns. In the Maldives, they don't do newborn circumcisions.
Oh, gosh.
They do around 7, 8, and 10-year-olds up there. So it's around there.
Yeah, no, I won't name him, but I have a relative who was actually circumcised when he was 9, and I remember when it happened, and he came back, and it wasn't. Yeah, he went through. It was pretty bad. He's still pretty traumatized by it to this day. So.
Well, yeah, everyone I know has a story about, the circumcision and how, it affected them. But during the season, there'd be it would be this big hoo-ha where there's music shows and families get together and
like it's a happy time. Like it's party time. Let's cut off our body parts.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then you'd have these men dressed up as women dancing and all of that. And it's actually something that is a thing. So I don't know how, that they're able to attack the actual LGBT community, but, have these kind of events and functions at
like
the same.
Drag queens.
Yeah, that's right.
Fantastic.
Yeah, exactly.
We have that here in Toronto, so at least we have one thing in common. It doesn't coincide with circumcision festivals, but anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, circumcisions in a festival is just weird, and it shouldn't be there. I think.
Yeah.
But okay.
Go ahead.
Anyway. No, I have more questions about the circumcision, but it's going to take us off topic.
It'll take it. Yeah. I just wanted to get to this situation with what's happened recently. So let me know if I start cutting out again, and Yaz, I'll let you hijack again. What happened was after the death of Yamin Rashid, I got some emails and I got a bunch of tweets just telling me from secular writers and secular activists in the Maldives.
Actually, I am going to interrupt you, Ali. If you could tell us a little bit about Yamin. No, you're not cutting.
Oh, okay.
But if you could just give our listeners some background about Yamin, just briefly.
Yeah, Yamin Rashid was he was a secular activist, right? And he was a blogger, and he essentially is just a writer who cares about secularism, like myself. The only thing is, I ended up. I'm living here freely, and I'm writing, and I'm doing this podcast. He, on the other hand, was hacked to death in his home for expressing his views, for having blasphemous views, for apostasy, and all of those pretty much victimless crimes, just changing his mind and just thinking about things differently. So he's a secular activist and blogger who was hacked to death in his own house in the Maldives for writing his thoughts. Okay. He's not the only one. There was another activist named Hilat Rashid, who you've mentioned, who had his, in your other writings. And you say that he had his throat slashed and he barely survived the attack. Mm-hmm. And the other person that you mentioned earlier on, another activist, secular activist, Ahmed Rilwan, was kidnapped. He's abducted from his own home, and he is now feared to be dead because nobody's heard from him. And you said that he's been missing now for 1,000 days, right?
It's actually 1,012 days today.
1,012 days. So you're keeping track, and that's good because he's being remembered.
It's actually 1,012 days. 1,012 days. Yeah, 6 hours, 48 minutes, and 22 seconds right now.
Wow. Okay, so this is obviously not a one-off thing. It's a serious situation. It's actually very reminiscent of, well, my friend Avijit Roy, who was hacked to death in Bangladesh. He was actually from Atlanta. He was an American, and he went there at a book fair, and he was hacked to death in Dhaka, Bangladesh. So this is, and then there were a series of other bloggers and activists who underwent the same fate in Bangladesh as well. And now we're seeing this in the Maldives. We've also seen this recently in Pakistan with the lynching of Mashal Khan in his university by university students, not Islamists, nobody, just the people at his university who lynched him, shot him, beat him to death. So, this is obviously, this is extremely disturbing. And now you're in this situation, you're probably, you're speaking, you're in hiding, you're in an undisclosed location right now.
Mm-hmm.
And you could be in the position of any of these people.
I could be, yes.
And these are your friends. So can you just talk about what the dynamic is? Is this something that has been happening for a long time? Is there a recent resurgence of this? Has the community there become more fundamentalist, or has it always been like this? What's the underlying dynamic of this phenomenon?
And the ex-president that spoke up against all of this, was he supportive of secular people when he was president?
Okay, so a little bit more background. Maldives was relatively a moderate Islamic country. We've been an Islamic country for the last 900 plus years, but during all that time, there was a lot of Sufi influences and other non-extreme iterations of the Islamic religion.
And was there a lot of influence from the tourists too? Like, was there any Western influence at all?
But the tourism is in the history of things relatively new. I think it's about 40 years or so that the tourism industry has been there. So, but the tourism industry has played a major role in the secular movement inspiration, and because it's opened the country to the larger world, and we're able to see how other people are and all of that. But going back to the background of how the radicalization has happened, during the Gayoom regime, the 30-year-old dictatorship, he started initially arresting mullahs of extreme views as sort of religious harmony and that kind of narrative. And while in prison, what they were doing was they were torturing these mullahs, like shaving their beards with chili sauce and things like that. So there was a lot of hatred being sort of boiling underneath because of those events. And when Nasheed came into the presidency in 2008, he mistakenly...
Nasheed is the one that was democratically elected?
Yes, Nasheed is the democratic president. He made the mistake of, assuming that Islamists could be part of the democratic process. And he invited them into the government. He made a ministry of Islamic ministry. And as soon as, you let the extremists be part of the democratic process, as fair as it seems, that everybody should be welcome, people who don't believe in democracy shouldn't be allowed to participate in democracy. But, as soon as they started being part of the democratic process, they started, introducing in these mullah speeches and events, and they started traveling down the country, giving dawah sessions and whatnot. And as a result, this radicalization, but the radicalization has been slowly happening in the last 10 to 15 years, but it only started showing its face really ugly after Nasheed invited them into the government. So, but Nasheed would later admit after he was toppled that it was a mistake. But what's done is already by then done, and he was brought down on the pretext of defending Islam, as I mentioned earlier. And by 2010, myself, Hillat, Rilwan, Yamin, we all met around 2010, just 2 years into the Nasheed administration. And my brother, he's in asylum in New Zealand at the moment. And there are a few others which I will not name, who sort of, we started first initially with a petition against the Adalat Party. Adalat Party is the sort of politicized version of the Islamists in the form of a political party.
So sort of like the Muslim Brotherhood kind of thing.
Yes, absolutely. And the people running the party, were pretty much sort of Muslim Brotherhood inspired guys like Sheikh Shahim and so forth and so forth. So we started initially by getting together and saying, look, let's petition Nasheed government to, get these guys out of the government because they're hindering on democratic reforms that we were incrementally achieving. And once we did that, we sort of came onto the map of the guys, the Islamists in the country. By 2000, so that was around June, July that we did the petition. And by December on 2010 Human Rights Day, we had an event called Silent Solidarity, which was, we were going to protest against, freedom of thought, freedom of conscience, freedom of religion, by simply just having a get together, no placards, no signs, nothing, just by virtue of being there, our presence to be covered by the media, and that would be it. So that set off a trigger of, like flag burnings and Jewish flag burnings and Israeli flag burning kind of an event. At the same time, there was some...
So like to counter you? Is that what the idea was? Or
there was two things. To counter us, at the same time, Nasheed had some Israeli medical guys offering some free medical projects in the islands as well. So there was two things at the same time happening. So the response was to counter both at the same time. So that year we did.
Poor Israelis, they just get pulled into everything.
Yes, they do.
Where they're trying to help, they're like, "Let's give you medical supplies. Fuck you, we're burning your flag."
So yeah,
okay.
it was eye doctors. So the narrative was they were stealing, eyeballs and whatnot, and corneas and irises and everything. You name it, they were stealing it. And the following year we had the second event as well of Silent Solidarity. In 2011, and that one was attacked directly, and Hillat had his head cracked open, and all of that went really badly.
What happened? Was it with the police attacked him?
No. These were like, radicalized gangs. So so they're not religious in any sense. They just look like thugs, basically. So they'd have the beard and they'd have sleeves rolled up a little bit, so that, that part of the ankle is not in hellfire, that story.
Yeah. So you always have the two, right? You've always got the nice Islamists that are wearing suits and they speak, properly. And then you've got the thugs that are the jihadis
exactly.
But they're both doing the exact same thing. They both got the exact same.
Like if they won't lynch you themselves, they'll throw you to the mob. But Armin, you had a question.
Yeah, just a short question. How, a lot of people ask us, they hear these stories and say, we need your help. And they ask, well, how can I help? What would you say to people that are actually interested in helping in any small way they can to get you or people like you into a safe place, but they have no idea what they can do?
Or even help your cause,
There's a lot of fear at the moment in terms of, empowering secular voices in the country. Maldives is very small in the sense it's like a small town. And the whole country is like a small town in any Western place where everyone literally knows everyone else. And secrets are the most hardest thing to keep in the country.
So what is the population of the country, if you could just share with the audience?
It's about 400,000 people in the entire country at the moment.
Wow.
So, and the capital
Okay.
itself is about 6 square kilometer island. And in that 6 square kilometers, we have about 150,000 people, and the rest are dispersed over little islands, about 200 islands. Some islands having 10,000, which is like the bigger population, and some others are having like 100. Even, and 500. Some islands doesn't have a population enough to have economies of scale.
Right.
My question is not about raising, we know we're doing, I think we're doing that a little bit, bringing attention to voices and stuff. We need to do a much better job with Maldives because it's not getting attention. But my question is specifically about helping you get out, because we tried to do this, with Rana Ahmed, but the only thing we could do was to give her money to support her financially when she was trying to get out. But we didn't help her at all on the process of actually getting out. That was all her herself. But we just desperately want to know, we tried so many things, and it's hard to figure out what can we do other than calling, we call people in Amnesty International, we got people in the UN, and we get denied or hung up on, or we don't hear responses. And even when somebody that really wants to help us, they file something and it gets denied somewhere else or gets ignored. Is there anything that you do you need sponsors? Do you need somebody? What can people do if somebody hears their story and they oh, this is horrible, I want to help this person? What is it that they could do? Do you know if anything they can do or somebody they could talk to, or somebody, is petitions matter? I don't know. Do you have any suggestions?
So I'm now registered with the UNHCR as an asylum seeker, but with that comes that I can't hold a job as part of the rules there, and I can't have a bank account and all of that. So in the country that I'm in, I don't have any of those options.
And you've been there for 5 years?
No, not in this country for 5 years. I arrived. I was in Malaysia for the 5 years that I was out, but my visa expired, and then I flew to Sri Lanka initially, and then after that I had to leave as soon as I registered with as a seeker, and because.
May I have a question about this?
Yes, go ahead.
By the way, this is Faisal, in case you don't know me. I'm the secular caliphate.
Everybody knows you.
Everybody knows Faisal.
I actually, speaking of the UNHCR, I came into the United States through the UNHCR. So the UNHCR are the ones who actually helped me out to come to the United States. And I registered through Malaysia.
Mm-hmm. So just a little, Faisal, before you go on, can you talk about your background? Because Faisal is also somebody who was kind of on the run in a way like you are. And eventually he did arrive in the U.S. As a refugee, right? So there are some parallels there, right?
Yeah. So with me, I don't know if this is recent, but when I applied for the UNHCR, they didn't ask me. Well, first of all, they ask you that you need to have a visa in the country you're requesting asylum at. So in my case with Malaysia, I had a student visa because I did my college over there. But they didn't tell me I cannot get a bank account because it was kind of necessary for someone to survive over there if they don't have a bank account. Even though some of these societies are cash based, but overall, I don't remember there was a regulation about that you cannot have a bank account. Is that recent or?
Yeah, let me explain that. So this is depending on the host country where the UNHCR is based at the time. So So in my case, when I applied, the country is not part of the signatory on the UNHCR charter. So they are tolerating refugees and asylum seekers, but they're not legally protected.
Yeah.
He's not in Malaysia, Faisal. We're not saying where he is.
Okay, but okay. So I see. So maybe it's a different country, so they probably have different rules about.
That's correct.
Yeah. Right. So it depends on the, where UNHCR is. If in the case of Malaysia, if Malaysia is part of the UNHCR charter, then the rules are different to asylum seekers and all of that. But, I'll tell you, I applied in Sri Lanka and I've since left to a safer place. Sri Lanka is not part of that, UNHCR charter, and Sri Lanka has regulations with regards to how to protect their labor force from asylum seekers. So you can't legally work, you can't have a bank account, and as part of that Sri Lankan regulations there, and so that was what was told to me by them.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the threats that you've been getting?
Boy, those are a lot of threats, though.
I just want the audience to know what like how difficult of a situation you are in, and how, just because and why, and also why have you been receiving these threats? Like, if you could explain that as well.
So yeah, so going back to the initial story of, so when we did the Silent Solidarity 2 events in 2010 and 11, that sort of was also used as a catalyst to bring down the Nasheed regime, Nasheed government. And since then, we've been vocal, open, secular activists. There are very few who write under our own names, and very few who talk about, human rights and universal human rights values in our own name. And as a result, it's attracted threats from under the pretext of defending Islam or anti-Islamic, the secular views and universal human rights are seen as anti-Islamic. But so the threat started from way back then, but it's accelerated over the years to a point where it would be weird to not receive a death threat now in a week. It would be like, hang on, what's going on? Like, I didn't get a death threat this week. So it escalated to that point.
How did you were saying the country was pretty secular before that, or at least it was pretty democratic? And then in the past 10 years, this surge of people?
Okay. So that's a mistake to say it was democratic before. It was never a proper democracy.
Okay. Sort of like an Egyptian democracy.
Egyptian democracy, where,
which means dictatorship.
Mubarak style.
Right.
So it was a 30-year-old dictatorship, but it was relatively controlled, moderate form of Islam during that time. And as soon as, Gayoom started arresting this incoming mullahs and shaving their beards with chili sauce and things like that, there was a lot of anger and animosity.
And so they became more religious.
Yes,
as a
they
reaction.
became more religious. And
so I'm sorry, this is the second time you mentioned the shaving the beards with chili sauce. So that does that mean what I think it does? That instead of shaving cream,
yes, exactly. Use chili sauce as the shaving cream and then shave it off. So
holy shit,
that would be really painful. You can,
So who did this to who exactly, and why?
Yeah, Gayoom did this to the initial incoming mullahs who were being trained in Saudi Arabia and Pakistan as part of the, Egyptian style control mechanism. But that really resurged the mullahs with more vigor and energy, and they've literally controlled the narrative in the years since then. So this extremist extreme version started forming out of
a backlash
hatred,
almost.
As a backlash from there. So 2000 saw the radicalization increase and up to a point where now, if you look at a picture of Maldivian women, they wouldn't be wearing headscarves, hijabs, and niqabs back then. But, now like 80% or 90% of them would have it.
Wait, when you say back then, how many years are we talking? How long did it take for your whole country to change?
About 15 years since 2000, it's gradually become, so yes.
So would you say it was a secular dictatorship before then? Would you say that?
The word secularism was literally introduced into mainstream by us. In the Maldives.
Not necessarily introduced, but like, would you say it was a non-religious dictatorship before?
No, it was a moderate Islamic one, he said, Armin.
No, it was always a Islamic dictatorship, but it was a moderate form of Egyptian-style dictatorship.
Yeah, so more like Saddam, right? I mean, Saddam Hussein, there is this big claim made by many...
Yeah,
ignoramus, like extremely ignoramus people like Rand Paul and stuff on foreign policy. They would say Saddam Hussein was a secular dictator. I mean, anybody who lived under Saddam, who had any basic understanding of Saddam, like Saddam introduced the faith campaign. He put Allahu Akbar in the Iraqi flag and introduced Islamic education into schools.
But to be fair, he did that after the first Gulf War.
Like 10 years after his ruling. So of the 30 years he ruled, only 10 years of it was secular, and the rest was mostly under... So, like, I mean, even when he was ruling in the first years, I mean, it was, yes, he was anti-Islamist. What's that?
So it's a little bit more nuanced than that, in the sense that in the Maldives, it was never allowed for anyone to have a faith other than Sunni Islam, but it wasn't visibly Islamic or extremist in that sense. So the control mechanisms are slightly different than it was in the Middle East, but it was always Islamic, and it was always a single religion, and they're very proud of the label, that we are 100% Muslim country, and that the claim is that there's only 200% Muslim countries in the world right now, at Saudi Arabia and in the Maldives. So they're very proud of the label. Wait a minute,
Saudi Arabia is not 100% Muslim. That place is full of expats.
I know, but they're not citizens.
Ah, yes.
Yeah. The reason why I was asking if you think, a lot of leaders, dictator leaders, they use the Islam labor, but they don't rule with it. You know what I mean? Like Faisal disagrees with that, but because a lot of people say, well, Saddam claimed to be a little bit religious, but he didn't really use it as a way to rule, so it was technically secular. But I know he disagrees with that. Like the same thing.
It's not like I disagree with that. Facts disagree with that. It's not a matter of opinion.
No, all right, but at least we could say that, I could say that about like Reza Shah. At least it was like he would call himself a Muslim, but he was very anti-Islamic.
Reza Shah was a dictator of Iran. He was a Shah of Iran before.
Anyway, you guys, let's just stay on topic.
I just want to get back to the topic. I think, like, do you think that this is like a trend that you see, that the governments go full on anti-Islamic or anti-extreme Islamic, and it always has the opposite reaction that they were hoping for? Like it happened, it started the Islamic Revolution in Iran. In Turkey, you're getting the opposite reaction now after Ataturk after many years. In Egypt, you're getting the opposite reaction after dictators like trying to be against the Muslim Brotherhood. Now you see that in the Maldives as well. Do you think this is
actually the Maldives invited the Muslim Brotherhood into the government?
Well, it's not the Muslim Brotherhood in the name, but it's the version of the version. So, I mean, it's a little bit more nuanced than what you described, because the government before the 30-year-old dictatorship, it still identified itself as Islamic. It was in practice Islamic, but it had its own, toothless version of Islam, so to speak.
Do they have Tinder in Maldives? If they have Tinder, it means it's secular. That's the way I say it.
I'm sure there are a few people using Tinder, at least.
Actually, I'm just out of curiosity. Is alcohol legal in the Maldives or no?
Right, alcohol is legal in the resorts.
Right.
Now, so there's like
for tourists.
100 plus resorts there, and then 200 plus islands with locals in there. The whole country has 1,800 islands or so.
Yeah, people in Pakistan. I remember a lot of several of my friends who got married went to the Maldives for honeymoons all the time from places like Pakistan and so on.
So I have a question just
on
on the tourism aspect, because so for locals, so you say like all this alcohol is being sold by the resorts and stuff. How big is the interaction between the people who stay in the resorts and the average Maldivian citizen?
Right, very good question. So when a tourist arrives in the Maldives, they land at the airport. Now, the airport itself is on a separate island. You know, the capital is on a separate island. Every resort is on a separate island. So it's a one island, one resort concept. It's quite unique in the sense that it's very few places in the world has this concept. So when you arrive in the Maldives at the resort, you don't have to change your dollars into local currencies. You know, a tourist would pay with dollars. So there's this parallel economy going side by side. So the Maldivian rupiah economy, which is for the locals, and the dollar economy, which is for the tourists and the resort businesses and the magnates that run it. So when they arrive, they're whisked off on a seaplane or a speedboat into a resort where the locals serve as, you know, waiters or room boys or whatever. And they also
What is that? What is the room
dollars.
boy? I mean, is that for gay people or?
No, room boys are people who attend rooms. Yeah. So it's a parallel economy completely. And the fact that they don't have to change the dollar into local currency, it means that it only goes into the coffers and in the pockets of the very rich elite who are able to own the resort businesses and so forth. So if someone was sick or needed to travel overseas or needed to buy dollars, there's a cap even. So a air ticket out of Maldives gets you $500 at the airport before leaving.
Wow, interesting. Now, I mean, the reason I'm asking this question because let me tell. I mean, I know at least like 80 to 100 people from friends of mine went to the Maldives, and almost all of them had an awesome experience. Like all of them, and I imagine they have lived in a bubble, right? They have lived in a bubble.
Yeah.
Just like, for example, somebody goes to Lebanon, right? Because I lived in Lebanon for a while. And if you are a tourist who goes to Lebanon, you stay at the Hamra district. Most of them are tourists in Beirut. But if you drive 20, 30 miles south, it's Hezbollah headquarters. Literally Hezbollah headquarters. You can actually see Ayatollah Khamenei photos over there. But yet, most of the tourists who come from UK, US, Canada, whatever, when they come to Lebanon, they see a very beautiful secular country, but they don't see that kind of a negative aspect within Lebanon. So I'm expecting that even Malaysia has a kind of side like this, right? Like in Kuala Lumpur, it's kind of a secular. You have alcohol, you have clubs, you have nightclubs. Because I've been to all of them, so I know that. But for some states in Malaysia, some provinces in Malaysia, they actually have Sharia law. Like they actually have
I think it's Kelantan or something.
Kelantan and all of these areas.
Same thing like Indonesia too. You got Bali, but then you've also got Sharia law in other areas.
So like I think Sarawak and some others in Malaysia, in which like they literally like have canning of gay people, and they also in the Malaysian law, if you are a Malay Muslim, the police can actually take you from the bars. So people who can drink are the only non-Malay Muslim Malaysians and tourists. So there is kind of like a bubble world.
Yeah, absolutely. So for all tourists who come into the Maldives, who stay in these resorts, you know, they're able to buy pork dishes and alcohol and anything else there are even resorts that specifically market as, gay havens and LGBT islands as well. I've recently seen one resort market for, the gay market as well. And this is, and I've used the word before, and it's not that I labeled it as a tourism apartheid country. It's been sort of, slowly getting that label, but it's definitely a tourism apartheid country where there's a complete separation from one way for the locals and one complete different economy and lifestyle and everything for tourists. So whenever they arrive, they are in the bubble. It's an extremely hospitable, awesome experience where, sun, sand, sea, the sunny side of the life. And these are all slogans that, it's associated with the Maldives. And it's true. Those experiences are absolutely fantastic. It's curated to be just that. But this is not the experience of the local. Now, there's just 30 minutes boat ride from the capital, Male. There's an island called Mafushi. Mafushi has the biggest jail in the country. And on the same island, there's a fence dividing the island into two. Local tourist investment. So there's people on the same beach who are absolutely enjoying in their bikinis, swimming around. On the other side, you've got people being murdered, boiled with hot water, shaved with, chili sauce or whatnot. And it's unbelievable. But these two worlds don't interact, and they don't know of each other, so to speak.
So if you fly back to the Maldives today and land there, like, are the police going to be waiting for you in the airport right away? Like, are you on a list and they would be would you even make it past the airport? Like, you're going to go directly from the airport to, what happens? Like, they're going to execute you or torture you? Do you know what
the country is now recently trying to introduce the death penalty as part of enforcing, Islamic law. We've had a moratorium on the death penalty for quite a while, like almost 50 years, if I'm not mistaken. I've been picked up at the airport twice and taken straight to jail. One time, that was in 2003 2002 when I came for holiday. I was studying in Australia. I was picked up at the airport for drinking overseas.
How did they know?
I actually had a drink on the airplane, so I don't know if someone in the airplane reported me, like another Maldivian reported me or whatnot, but the charge was drinking overseas.
But you think they were just picking on you because they knew you're an activist?
Well, I've already been in trouble in 1999 over a phone call I made to the police complaining about a public arrest. So I started that process as a teenager. So I spent, in my first arrest, I spent 14 days in a holding cell, another 20 days in solitary confinement, about 58 days in a cell that was more like a warehouse made out of iron sheets. There was 120 people sharing 3 toilets. I have some scars and stuff from that experience. And then I was taken to the court one day straight out of this Mafushi jail, and I was sentenced 15 years in jail under the terrorism laws at the time. And on the same day, my sentence was commuted to 150 Maldivian rupiah, and which is equivalent to about $10, because I had no prior convictions and I was a student. But what they do is, when you have a charge that is suspended over you, they use that to blackmail you, to manipulate you after that. So the suspended charge can be recalled any day, and you can be taken to the police.
That's why you have to get out of there.
Yeah. So when I got released that time, after the, my sentence was commuted to 150 rupiah, like $10, I left the country on the same day And then I came back again in 2002 for another holiday. And at the airport, I was picked up for drinking overseas. Initially, they took away my passport, and then after a urine sample, I was let go the following day, and I was brought back into question in 5 days afterwards because my urine didn't show up to be positive. So I was taken.
What do you mean? They were looking for what were they looking for in your urine? Drugs?
Alcohol or drugs or whatever, anything that is.
So when you say it wasn't positive, you mean it wasn't positive for any?
There was nothing like, no substance that they showed up in the test.
Okay, so that's a good thing.
All right. Yeah, so then I was taken to a solitary confinement island for 11 days because they were certain that I should be positive and it didn't come up positive.
Oh.
So after 11 days, they transferred me to house arrest for 2 months, and I was made to write a letter to the president begging for forgiveness and let go. And after I wrote the letter, I was released, and then I left the country again. And then I didn't come back to the Maldives until 2006, and I was not allowed to come back because I was running one of the earliest dissent newspapers online, The Observer. So I started The Observer 2004, and I was running to The Observer 2004, 5, 6. When I quit, my father at the time, an MP, he negotiated my ability to come back to the country, and I joined mainstream politics from there. But then I quit mainstream politics in 2010 to go into like minority activism and secular activism because we need to address the core issues. Otherwise, we're just fooling ourselves.
Yeah.
So I had just a couple of questions. I mean, before we go ahead before we conclude all this, I wanted to make sure that we got this in. Like, do you have family there? Do you have? I mean, you don't have to answer in detail or anything, but do you have family, loved ones? How do you handle that? Like in the sense that, do you ever feel like what you're doing, does it pose any risk to them at all?
Well, my family.
I mean, again, you don't have to talk about this if you feel it's risky.
Right. So I could say some, though. My dad disowned me, and my younger brother is also disowned, the one in New Zealand, because, he doesn't think that I should be talking about religion in the political context and whatnot. My relatives, my extended family, then I haven't spoken to any of them and they haven't spoken to me. So I literally assume that I'm completely cut off by my extended family. I do have relationships with my siblings to a civil level. But yeah, basically I'm cut off at the moment, and that's just the way it is.
I know this is one thing I wanted to highlight. That's a universal experience for so many people who just change their mind about religion, is that they often become isolated. It's not just a matter of legal punishment or becoming marginalized from society, but you lose the people you grew up with, you lose your parents. I mean, this is very common part of the ex-Muslim experience. It is very lonely. And
I don't know if we ever really changed our mind, because we never really got a chance to make up our mind. We just made up our mind.
What I mean is like the classic, like, the idea of ex-Muslims, like, where they used to be. Yeah, you're right. Like, it's not, you were indoctrinated right from the beginning, but just from a very technical point of view. Like, you have this one thing, one day you decide, like, Dad, Mom, I'm not, I'm not, I don't believe in this stuff anymore. I have doubts about it. And next thing you know, your family's not there anymore. So that's and what about your just in terms of your work? Are you a full-time activist, or are there other things that you do as well?
Well,
to get by?
My wife and I, we have a small fashion design business. She's the designer. I do the administrative and marketing sort of stuff. And we worked out of a home.
Oh, nice.
We worked out of a home studio. But we are now unable to do that work because clients cannot come to our place and expose where we live and all of that. So that's an issue. And when I'm not working with her on the fashion design business, then I'm pretty much an activist online full time. And I write my blog and I manage the pages that I manage.
So Armin has a small question for you, and then I have a big question for you.
All right. Before I ask a small question, anybody in the fashion industry, if you want to help this, if you want to send out a work visa, maybe if that's possible, if you think you could help out by hiring him and his wife in a way, so at least he has a visa to come in and then get asylum, that would be really good. If you could reach out.
And we're going to go with like the links and stuff for your work and all the other stuff that you do, we'll give you a chance to sort of, say all that towards the end.
So my question is that how will you respond to people that say, then why do this? Why all this activism? Why put yourself at risk? We don't need atheist martyrs. It's not where, would you, if you go back all the way, would you do all this again, or would you take a different path?
Knowing the people that you know and the hardships they've been through, it's not that I want to be a martyr. I never set out to with a death wish that I want to get killed or be threatened, but seeing the suffering of the people that you love and the inability and the absolute helplessness that you feel knowing they're going to go through all this stuff. You don't start as let's go secular all out. You start with little things like, let's try and help this person, let's try and help that person, because it's the right thing to do. And one thing leads to another thing, and then next thing you know, you're being hunted. So it's I'd still try and help the people that I wanted to help and all of that if I had to do it again. And and if that leads to the same conclusion again, it would still be the right thing to do, because, there are people who need help, and to deny that help to those people is to deny humanity itself. So yeah, I'd do it again.
We get asked the same question, Muju. Faisal and I had this conversation once after the Avijit Roy was killed, and we talked about this. We're like, should we do this? Because this is when things like that happen, your friends and relatives read it in the news and they ask you, they say, why are you doing this? What is the point? Why don't you just live with your family safe? Why put everybody at risk? Why put yourself at risk? And we came to the conclusion after that happened, every time something like that happens to Avijit or to Raif Badawi or any of these people who are suffering because of it, it makes us want to double down, because that's how terrorism works. That is terrorism. If people change their behavior because of fear, you don't have to be killed. You don't have to, none of that is, the victims of terrorism aren't necessarily just the ones who are dead. It's pretty much everybody who decides not to publish a cartoon that is in the headlines, like, major American newspapers, or people who decide, okay, I'm just going to stay quiet and I'm not going to say anything. They're all victims of terrorism, right? And if you ever give in and you ever stop speaking, you yourself have become a victim of terrorism. I mean, that's something that I think, Muju realizes. I think
he left.
I also did. Did we lose him?
It says Muju left the conversation.
Yeah, I think his connection got cut, but at least we got almost
hopefully
everything.
He'll come back.
He'll come back to say goodbye.
Yeah, and I think Yaz had one last question.
I did have a question. I hope I have a chance to ask it.
Yeah, but I'm curious. Now I'm very curious to see what Yaz's question is. So.
Hopefully he'll come back, but if he doesn't, I think I already know the answer to my question. It was a loaded question. And maybe you guys can respond to it for me. So when he was talking about the Islamists being invited into being part of the government in the Maldives, and how the president later said that that was the biggest mistake that he had made, because when you have people that are inherently against democracy and you invite them to be part of the democratic process, they were basically, they weren't there to work with people, they were there to overtake. And that's why it only took 10 to 15 years for the whole country to change what it looked like then and what it looks like now. Obviously much more conservative today. So I was going to ask if he can speak to the Maldives being like a microcosm, and if he sees something similar happening in other countries in the world, because I know that we've mentioned Egypt, and I think that Egypt is an example of that happening as well. And I think a lot of countries here in the West see this happening all over the world, or maybe they don't because they're not paying attention, but they never think that it's actually going to happen in their own country. They never think, oh, who cares if we invite Linda Sarsour into the White House? You know, who cares if the Muslim Brotherhood aren't deemed a terrorist organization? They kind of have, I don't know if it's naivete, or if it's arrogance, but they kind of have this attitude of like, well, that's never going to happen to us. And so I was going to ask him, because I know Egypt definitely had that attitude.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe I should answer it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that the Democrats, I mean, you mentioned Linda Sarsour, for example, Dalia Mugahid. I think they probably believe that this is all paranoia. What you just described is just paranoia, and Muslims are just like anyone else. There is no, I mean, the thing is like there's a conflation between race and religion, right?
But what do you think?
So they say that, oh, the Chinese. I mean, me personally speaking, I think that all religious parties, and most importantly Islamist ones, should be banned from entering the government.
I totally agree.
As a pure secularist, people who want to bring theocracy to the country should not be allowed to participate in the government.
I don't think they're admitting that they want to bring theocracy, though, right? Like you see somebody like Linda Sarsour standing there. She's talking about acting like she's a Democrat. She is...
No, but with Linda Sarsour is not as clear as it is, like, let's say the Muslim Brotherhood, the real, like the members of the Muslim Brotherhood. But even there, like you guys should watch the latest interview Shadi Hamid did with the leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood in Syria. And the guy was so mild that you would think he's, but obviously he's pandering to the West, and that way the West would support him.
Well, I mean, they don't get involved in government, but
they do.
They pretty much every. No, I know, but sorry, let me rephrase that. Supposing they don't get directly involved in government, but what they do is they do get lobbyists. All of these people, they do have lobbyists. They have people who go out and they lobby congressmen and stuff. I guess, you know, that's where a lot of them exert their influence. And they also have a lot of, in democracies, they have sway over voters. I mean, if you look at Israel, like a lot of the settlement, the expansionists, the really conservative Orthodox factions have, the Likud tries to appease them a lot because they're, a huge part of their voter base. So that affects it, even in the U.S. I mean, the evangelical Christians have significant sway over, both Democrats and Republicans are going to try.
But with Christians,
to get them.
Can I respond to yes?
Okay, I just wanted to say really quickly that when Christians try, everybody is really vehemently opposed, and they're right away they recognize this is a threat. But when it's Muslims, they don't recognize it as a threat. And I think it might have something to do with the bigotry of low expectations, because they're like, oh, these simple little savages. Oh, they're so cute with their little authentic little headgear. They don't think of Muslims as a threat, and they're wrong.
This is kind of like damned if you do, damned if you don't, because if you give them an opportunity for democracy, they will come and they get to power, and then they will remove democracy, right? And then if you take away the democracy for them, and like democracy for everybody, but you guys can't participate, then they're like, hey, look at these motherfuckers. They're like telling that, oh, we have
but we say no religions. We're saying it's secularism, right? No,
but I'm talking about religion. Like, well, now Islam represents the most but religion in general feeds on being the victim, right? And they will use that to their advantage. They were like, look, these people won't give us a voice. The only way out is to fight.
And I agree.
Right?
That's because they try to make Muslims like a race. They talk about there's black groups, there's Muslim groups, there's Asian groups. No, that's wrong. There's no such thing as a Muslim group. It's not a racial group.
I know, but I'm not talking about a group. I'm talking about a dogma, a set of dogmas that it works. Like it's a virus, and it's a very effective virus, and it has many different. I mean, it's a kind of like a meme that survived, but it's survived because it has some really good attributes. So it has a very good means of survival, right? And I just think when you try to also shut it down, it has way to retaliate. That's why I believe in the bottom-up approach, because I think the long-term way of solving this problem is to make less people Muslim.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but
I mean?
I'm talking about the United States.
Yeah, I think like what you're mentioning, I mean, Armin, with the dooms if you don't, if you do, it's very like interesting with the refugee conversation is that they say, okay, if we bring all the refugees here, they're going to be terrorist attack. If we don't bring any refugees here, they will radicalize to become terrorists. Okay, so what should we do right now? It was like,
let's just kill ourselves.
So in one way, it's like they have, so in both ways they will win. So like if you think about it, if the United States, let's say ISIS blows up Times Square or something like this, and the United States retaliates, then they'll say, look, terrorists won, made America angry. If America does not retaliate out of fear that they will become terrorists, then we'll say, look, terrorists won. They made America afraid of invading. So in a way, terrorists will always win, like no matter how you spin it. I mean, first of all, because they are not thinking of a cost-benefit analysis, utilitarian perspective. For them, I mean, if you think about it, like the concept of jihad, if somebody kills you in the war, you go to heaven.
Yeah.
If you conquer the land, you go to heaven. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's a win-win situation. No matter how you spin it, they are the winners. If you kill them...
Another example is like if you go like Maldives, you give them democracy, then they will dominate, right? And if you go like Ataturk or Reza Shah,
they will use it to...
eventually because they will use it, and they will eventually either like Iran, like they have this revolution, or in Turkey, they're so tired of secularism that slowly becomes like Islamism grows and gains power. So what the fuck do we do?
It's like a casino.
We have to just make religion...
They always win.
They always win. We have to just continue what we're doing the way it is. Like even all of us remember that sexism was totally rampant and accepted. Being anti-gay was totally rampant and accepted. It was when I was growing up. Like gay jokes were fine. People calling each other.
Oh yeah.
When something was silly or dumb or whatever, they'd be like, "Oh, that's so gay." Like all of these things were totally accepted. And it hasn't been actually that long, and our society has progressed to the point that we have like a zero tolerance to any discrimination against LGBT people,
unless it's coming from brown people.
Well, that's very true. Yeah, that's true.
But Muju is back with us. He's back with us. So
I was just saying that I think the answer is probably zero tolerance to religion in general, like all of us. Mm-hmm. But
except me.
Muju, Yaz had a final question for you. And then after that, we also wanted to kind of give you a chance to tell everybody where they can find your work. You have the fashion design thing if you want to talk about that and see if anybody can check your stuff out. And like Armin was saying, maybe help you out in that way, whatever channel. Mm-hmm. So, eventually, we'll do that. But first, Yaz has a final question that we were just talking about.
So really quickly, Muju, we were talking about it when you were gone. So just wondering to find out if your thoughts align with ours. Do you think that what is happening in the Maldives is sort of a microcosm for what could potentially happen in the United States? As far as there's an issue right now in the United States there are a lot of Muslim Brotherhood groups, all have different names, all coming under different guises. It's a very common tactic. Al Qaeda does the same thing. They have all different names for all their different groups, so that they don't look like they're one big group, and so that people aren't automatically adverse to them. But Islamists are sort of making their way into the White House and making their way into public discourse. Making their way into, leading liberal marches. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on, do you think America is totally immune to this kind of thing happening? Or do you think that there is cause for concern?
There's always cause for concern when it comes to Islamists, because they pretty much pretend to be part of the democratic process until they have gained enough strength into the political system. So America is quite big at the moment in terms of the size of the population, and the Muslim population is relatively small. But given enough time, the ambition would always be how to take over the system that, and then they've made no secret of it. They've openly said that they aspire to rule over America and the West. So I don't know how long it would take, but if we are comfortable enough in our chairs and our laurels to think that they wouldn't try, that would be a mistake. So, but hopefully that wouldn't happen, and the American people wouldn't allow that to happen.
I hope so too.
And I'd like to think that the American people are smarter and know what's going on in the world.
I like to think that too, and I think you're right. Right now, they are a small percentage, and the chances of it happening as quickly as it did in the Maldives obviously are very low. But it doesn't mean that we should turn a blind eye to it and just assume that it's going to be fine and just ignore it. But we should be just as vigilant with fighting against any religions trying to get themselves into the public sphere of a secular country.
Yeah, but having said that, we should be aware of bigotry against Muslim people, who most of them are harmless, and they seek to coexist among others. It's a specific group of radicals that we have to be worried about, and to be Islamophobic against Muslim people who are harmless is the wrong way to go about this, and I think we should be very careful how we address the issue.
I think we recognize that in the West. Like we understand that we don't want Christianity in our public secular schools. We don't want to teach kids creationism, but that doesn't mean that we're going to hate Christian people. You know what I mean? Just because we don't want Islam in the governments or Islam in the schools, it doesn't mean that we hate Muslim people or that we're bigots against Muslims. Like, I think that those are two completely different things. And when it comes to Islam, somehow, because it's a brown-skinned minority people, those lines are blurred. But if we start to just treat Islam in the same way that we treat Christianity because in the United States, Christianity, everybody is already aware that they are a powerful group and that we have to make sure that we don't allow them to overtake. But they just don't have that same vigilance when it comes to Islamic groups.
I think that you nailed it there, Yazik. I think it's so simple. It's the way that you treat Christianity, treat Islam the same way. Sure, one is different. The others, they have differences. They have differences in different times. They've been similar at different times, but treat both of them exactly the same. If you're treating Islam with kid gloves, then you are a victim of terrorism. That means you have been terrorized. If you can't treat both religions the same.
I would say we're not even fighting the radicals, because the radicals are also the victims. I think we're fighting an ideology. Like, I would say the radicals are the number one victims of Islam, because their entire lives have been hijacked by an ideology that they've been brainwashed with. So
Amin is absolutely right.
Let me say a talking point that I mostly use in debates with liberals in America. I say, what do you call a Republican who is against gay marriage? And they say bigot. Then I tell them, thank you for calling 90% of Muslims bigots. That is the easiest way to show the racism of lower expectations. Because if you're going to call a white Republican a bigot for opposing gay marriage, then maybe you should call Jewish people against gay marriage bigots, or don't call anyone bigots. I mean, equality for all. If you are stand against homophobia, then you should stand against homophobia coming from all people. You're not going to take the socioeconomics. Nobody's talking about the socioeconomics about people from Missouri, for example. They don't say, well, they grew up in farms, they grew up poor, globalization harmed them, therefore they hate gay people. They say, no, they're bigots. Nothing, no socioeconomic reason would allow a person from Kansas or Missouri or whatever to be a bigot. Therefore, no socioeconomic purpose from anybody coming from Pakistan, whatever, Maldives, all these countries, is a bigot too. That should be common sense.
Right.
But
The whole idea of bigotry is it isn't about who is saying it or what group is saying it, because if it's an idea, you have to be opposed to the idea, say, of homophobia. But if you're opposed to it depending on who's saying it, then it's not about the idea anymore, and then it's always about identity. And that's where identity politics comes from, and that's where the left has become such a victim of it, because they're embracing all these minorities with really conservative social values. So it's not about ideas, because it really depends on who says what. And then it's necessarily lends itself to identity politics. And the people who do have the ideas now, even bad ideas, is the other side. And then you're left in a vacuum. So that's Muju, thank you so much for joining us, man. I mean, you're just keep on doing your work. I mean, we're just keep us posted on what's happening there, and we're gonna try to help you in every way I can. I hope everybody listening agrees with me. And can you tell us a little bit about your blog and where people can find your writing, if you are on Twitter or on Facebook, how people can get in touch with you or contact you?
Okay. My Twitter is at Muju, MUJU, Naeem, NAEEM. My Facebook is facebook.com/MUJU, NAEEM. My blog is Muju Naeem, MUJUNAEEM.wordpress.com. So you can find me there, and I've sent the links for my wife's fashion design business to the group chat here.
And I'll share all of that.
That's great.
When we share your video.
by the way, just one comment. Don't use WordPress.com. We can get you a domain, man. Like, this is you would look terrible if you say that your website is WordPress.org. You need
Well, see, the thing is being in this situation, I if I'm unable to pay the domain at any particular time, unless I'm safer, the blog needs to just exist. It cannot come down. That was why it had to be a WordPress.
So,
Good point. Very good
that
point.
makes sense.
Also, I just want to say that
I could see to you.
People like you, I really admire you, because what you're doing, what we are doing, but with much greater risk. And we're sitting with some sense of safety in Canada and the United States, and I the amount of sacrifice that you're doing for this cause. And I know a lot of people might think that it's not worth it, but all these people that think it's not worth it, they're enjoying rights and freedoms that other people had sacrificed for. And if it wasn't for people like you, they wouldn't have enjoyed any of those rights that they're now enjoying. So thank you for everything you're doing.
We love you, Muju.
That was so good. Perfect. Yes, Muju.
Yeah, we couldn't
That's
have said
exactly
it better.
how we feel. How we all feel.
You're a hero, my friend.
Good to be here. I mean, good to meet you guys. I mean, it's been a long time coming. Awesome.
If any of our listeners have any ideas for support or help for Muju to help him to get out of where he's in asylum right now, then please contact us and we will pass on the support for sure. And we're going to try and get you and your wife safe as soon as possible.
I really appreciate it, guys.
Love you.
All right.
Take care.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you,
Have a good
everybody.
night.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
The secular jihadists have been made possible thanks to the gracious support of the Illuminati and the great state of Israel. That's what we have been told, but we haven't received our checks yet. In the meantime, we greatly appreciate the support of our current donors. Please consider supporting by sharing the podcast with your fellow heathens or by donating at patreon.com/SJME.